and you learn more about it, you'll begin to understand the implications of what these proposals may mean to you in the future. Now, Allan Buckmann is going to talk a little bit about tree decline in Mendocino County and Sonoma County and Napa County. We even observed some here today, just in our trip through, and he's going to talk about that. And I'm going to go on and talk about some of the things that we're beginning to see from some of the atmospheric experiments that are going on. And we're beginning to see tree decline. We're beginning to see more air and water pollution. And we have to know that the U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Navy, NASA, a lot of these agencies are engaged in upper atmospheric experiments. And the Navy brags that, gee, it's wonderful to use our atmosphere as a giant physics laboratory. But what are the consequences for us, our children, and our future if we're going to be able to experiment? They can experiment without our consent, our knowledge. But we do know, because the Navy, the Air Force, and NASA love to brag about these programs, and they even put the videos online. You can go to their websites. It is not a secret. What is a secret is that if the media does cover it, they say, oh, what a great experiment, the technology, how wonderful, but they don't talk about the consequences of what happens when these particles and chemicals come back to Earth. Rocket programs in the United States are releasing aluminum, barium, strontium, calcium, sulfur hexafluoride, aluminum oxide, trimethyl aluminum, and the list goes on, and we've got the documents and the studies and the university research. It is not a secret. But for most of the American people, they don't know, because it's just wonderful technology, and gee, how wonderful it is we can experiment, but we don't ever talk about the consequences. One of the other things that people have, I made this list of some of the things that can happen if you have rocket fuel emissions, jet fuel emissions, if you go into geoengineering programs and put up particles and chemicals, you're going to have increases in all of these problems and even more. The consequences for all of us are going to be tremendous. We can all say no, but we are being cut out of the discussion because not enough people know about this. The EPA report on jet fuel emissions, carbon monoxide, particulates, and nitrogen oxide lead to increased asthma, respiratory symptoms, and acid rain, volatile organic compounds, memory impairment, ozone, crop and tree damage, nitric oxide, beneficial atmospheric ozone depletion, carcinogens, soot, carbon black, and water vapor is one of the releasing things that you will find. The other thing that I would like to say is that we're doing a lot of atmospheric testing. The atmospheric testing is not a secret when done by rockets. It's very out in the open. Universities are studying it, and you can go to the Air Force, the NASA, all the websites, and they'll all talk about it. What is not being discussed by the media is the consequences of these programs or the number and scope of them. I listed a few experiments. The Navy Charged Aerosol Release Experiment. It's online. Anyone can look it up, or you can visit the Navy website. The U.S. Air Force Trimethyl Aluminum Night Cloud Experiment, one of which just happened with 5 rockets just this month. There's man-made cloud experiments with the jets leaving persistent jet contrails that turn into man-made clouds. There's the CREST program where they release barium, strontium, lithium, calcium, sulfur hexafluoride, and sulfur. All of this is rockets. And also, every time a missile goes up, a rocket, a space shuttle, anything, the fuel of rocket fuel has aluminum particulates in it. The Discovery Channel in August 2007, in a program, Can We Control the Weather, began to discuss MIT professor Emmanuel, suggested having a fleet of jets lay out highly toxic carbon black dust contrails on the west coast the United States in order to start weather fronts moving across the United States to steer hurricanes off the east coast of the United States. It is very interesting because we do see black contrails here on the west coast, and we can follow them across with increasingly intense weather fronts as they move across the United States. And so when we see the big black clouds with the black contrails in them, we know that they've got another program on their way. You can call and talk to Professor Emmanuel. He's quite interesting at MIT. He's willing to talk about this and research and studies on it. So this is not a secret either, but most people don't know that this was proposed back before 2007. This is a black contrail. It's not a shadow. We have hundreds of photographs, and the black contrails get wide and turn into trails just like the white one. Now, the white jet contrail was made after the black contrail over Ukiah, California. And some of the clouds you see there are some of the man-made clouds from earlier jet trails over our area. Now, this is in the summertime. Normally, we would have deep blue skies, good weather. We would not have cloud cover in July over Ukiah on a normal basis, and yet the cloud cover is beginning to increase. And this was right above the Albertson Shopping Center when I took the photograph. Well, I took a series of photographs. Now, weather modification. What I want to let all of you know is that in addition to the jets modifying our weather, weather modification is ongoing across the United States. This is the UCAR, NCAR. They list the NOAA listing of 69 programs in 11 states, and there's a map over here. I'll show it to you later, but the yellow areas are the designated programs in the United States, and then there's other countries as well. All of this has got some weather modification programs going, and they use ground-based methods, or they use small airplanes to put particles into the atmosphere for enhancing snow and rainfall. Most people do not realize that the weather is being modified on the scale that it is in all of these places. This is the map that I made based on the NOAA documents that I got from them directly, from NOAA in Maryland. And these are the states in yellow that are modifying the weather, enhancing rain or enhancing snow, hundreds of thousands of square miles. And in California, there's 30 of these programs, and there's no public consent, no knowledge for the most part, and anyone can modify your weather in California without your consent. Any private corporation, any individual, anyone. I could hire someone today to modify the weather in California, hire a company, and have it done, and I don't have to tell anyone that I'm going to do it or the purpose, whatever. In addition, Alberta, Canada is modifying the weather. Mexico is doing weather modification. The U.S. Air Force in Florida is conducting lightning experiments, and there's weather modification going on in Alaska as well. All of these are documented, dates, times, locations, month, who's doing it, who hired them, who's paying, all of this. However, not everyone, for example, in Texas and these other areas, has to tell the government that they're doing these programs, or for what purpose. You may be surprised to know the PG&E in California modifies your weather. Southern California City Council modifies your weather.